before the empty tomb and glorious resurrection, before the scandal of the cross, before Palm Sunday, the calling of disciples, and all the wonders of his ministry. Jesus traveled first to the wilderness, to the solitude and desolation of rock and sand, a king above kings, experiencing the hunger and destitution of man. And when the time came for temptation, despite 40 days of deprivation, the Lion of Judah stood firm, confounding every attack with the power of his perfection. In this season of Lent, we share in his sacrifice, not to experience anguish or to portray a counterfeit righteousness, but to draw closer to his holy presence. We withdraw from our distractions. We cast aside treasures and possessions, forsaking all that would separate us from his love. In this desert, he is the source of what sustains us, the joy in our surrender, the peace that surpasses all understanding. He is our hope in Lent.
Good morning, church. How you doing? Oh, just take a moment and wave at somebody you haven't seen in a while. And then do this. You'll call them later or text them. Hey, we got a new lectern up here, a podium, a pulpit, and it's kind of giving me a little bit of PTSD. See, the very first church that I preached in had a huge wooden pulpit. And the problem was that I may be cute and I may be smart, but I ain't tall. And so that pulpit, I was way too tall for me. So I showed up the next Sunday, the second Sunday I was preaching, and they had built me a little box to stand on. I felt like a little kid sitting on his phone book. Well, this one's much better, and I appreciate it, and it's interesting to see what God's going to allow to be spoken from this platform, from this podium. I want to talk to you today about fasting a little bit. You may think you know what fasting is, and I believe that you do, but I also think that God was sharing with me that we are ready for the next step beyond just giving something up. I want to challenge your view or your understanding of what it means to control your appetites or delayed gratification. You see, it's too easy for us to just think that fasting is giving something up for a time, maybe just to prove to God that we can do it, that we can have some sort of discipline. Or maybe that there's a wider purpose that we're saying, I'm going to rely on God rather than these things. But I think it goes even farther than that. I mean, this time of the year, you all are so very generous to me, and you give me things that, well, quite frankly, I shouldn't have, like sour watermelon Peeps. Or here, Dr. Pepper flavored Peeps. Anybody like Dr. Pepper? Tastes nothing like it. Peeps cereal. Peep sour gummies, and just for difference, Baker's chocolate. Anybody give up chocolate for Lent? Are you fasting from chocolate? Because I got lots of it, and I will share, but not with you. But see, there's some sense that out of all of the abundance that God has given us, and that we share with one another, that we should somehow say no to the best things in life to bring glory to God. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? I mean, God is an everlasting good Father, amen? And he wants to lavish his riches upon his children. He knows, as a good father, how to give good gifts to his kids. So why would we reject it? Why would we step aside from it? Why would we not use it? And that's where I say I think that giving things up is the beginning of fasting. But Wildewood, I think you're ready to know something more about it. Something more about what God is talking about in our obedience to him, to use what God has given us, not for our selfish purpose, but for the goodness of the kingdom and to prove of his blessing. Here's what I mean by this. Each week, we have been posting a devotion on the website from Dr. Mark Krause about the next scripture that we're going to be preaching on. And you should definitely be reading those on the website for the church or at his blog, Krause Corner. But also we've been posting pictures, and that's why we have these prints over here. Each week we've been looking at a different famous artwork that goes along with the topic, and this week it has to do with Van Gogh and his picture, his painting, Starry Night. We have a slide on that, I think. Thank you. Currently housed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, Starry Night became one of Van Gogh's most recognizable and beloved paintings. How many of you have seen this before? Most of us have. That's the kind of impact that he has had on us. It continues to captivate audiences around the world with its beauty, but also for me, as I look at it, it's the emotional depth in that. And I'm no art historian, I'm no art aficionado, but I'm definitely one who is a consumer of good art. But what's interesting to me is that when he painted it, Van Gogh was staying at the St. Paul de Mézereau monastery, which also served as a mental health asylum. As you know, Van Gogh had tremendous mental health challenges. The painting is based on the view from his window, particularly obviously at night, and the village in the distance, though he added elements from his imagination. In the foreground, we see a cypress tree. In the center, we see a church and a tiny village that didn't really exist there. And then, is it wind? Is it light? What is it in the sky? Is it the stars and the moon and Venus? These three things especially are representing things for his life. The cypress tree representing death or mourning. It's been a symbol of death in Europe for centuries. It's why even today, if you go to old cemeteries, maybe in the country or a small town, you find that they've planted cypress trees. You know, those thin, tall, spindly, spiky trees. That's why they're planted there, because they were supposed to be a symbol of death and mourning. The church, symbolizing his religious background and beliefs, at the center of his view is where he put the church. And the stars, he wrote later to a friend, were representing the hope that he had in his faith and in his health. It's interesting that the swirling colors, though, give inspiration, that he was trying to communicate, he wrote, that God is everywhere and in everything. Now, the reason that we're talking about this on a day where we talk about fasting is because here's what's happened. Van Gogh has taken something that God has given him, this insight, this view, this ability to paint it, and has not only taken the time to see it and to depict it upon the canvas, choosing the colors and the brush strokes and so forth. It's never easy. If you are a painter and artist, you know that art comes only after we labor and work and push. But what he did with it is he didn't hide it. He didn't destroy it. He didn't ignore it. What did he do with it? He offered it to the world. He offered it to you and I to share it. He was fasting from his isolation, which wasn't easy for him, so he could share it with all of us and those who come after us. See, fasting isn't only about giving something up. It's about gaining something in the process. Tall, thin trees representing death was balanced by the hope that he had in his religion, his faith, and in God's creation and his presence. So this morning I want to share with you a little bit from the life of Jesus, but more specifically from Mary's life and things that she had to fast from in order to be in ministry with Jesus, her son. Remember the story of Mary and Joseph taking the infant Jesus to the temple? We talked about it a few weeks ago, and even if you're not familiar with the story, all you need to know is that they took him there to name him, to dedicate him, to do the official things that they needed to do, the ritual of the religion of the day. But while they were there, a man comes up to them, Mary and Joseph, with the baby, and has incredible prophecies that God told him he wouldn't die until he saw the consolation of Israel, meaning until he saw the Messiah, which he did in infant form. How he knew, we don't know. God told him in some way. But he celebrated and he worshiped. But before he left, he said to Mary this, "A sword will pierce your heart as well." Kingdoms will rise and fall because of this Messiah. Things will be destroyed and things will be built because of him, but you will go through things yourself in your life and your ministry. We make the mistake of thinking that that was only spoken to Mary and only applied to her. Well, she had her specific things, but so do you and I. And I'm calling this fasting as well. Let me explain what I mean by that. At age 12, you'll remember, Mary and Joseph, with their family and friends, all went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. They were religious. They followed the rituals. They worshiped together. And Jesus, being 12 years old, went with them as well, with his brothers and sisters and cousins and friends. And while they were on their way home, Mary and Joseph suddenly realized what? Do you remember? That they lost Jesus. What a terrible feeling. Talking about a sword piercing your heart. So they walked all the way back to Jerusalem, and they found him in the temple, both asking questions and learning, and teaching in an amazing way. And people couldn't believe how mature, how learned, how smart that he was. Of course, they breathed a sigh of relief when they saw him, but Mary did what any mother would do in the world. She hugged him and slapped him all in the same motion. Now, why was this fasting? What did this mean? Well, Luke chapter 2 tells us that she said, "Son, why have you treated us this way? Your father and I were anxiously looking for you." See, there are contradictory forces at work here, like there oftentimes is in our life. I want what I shouldn't have. I consume more than what is really good for me. I go up when I should have gone down. I'm sad when I should be happy. I'm disconnected when I should be intimate with someone. "Son, why have you treated us this way?" is not scolding him saying, "Get away from me," but rather just the opposite, but to draw him close. But see, this constant desire to draw near to him and protect him has to be balanced with the fact that there are possibilities in the world that he needs to start to experience. What was his excuse? I had to be about my Father's business. I had to start doing what God the Father called me into doing. That's what happens all too often when children, called by God, at whatever age they are, 12 or older, when parents have to finally let them go. I've seen this happen far too many times, especially when I was teaching in Bible college. Students would come and want to go into ministry, and they had family behind them that said, ministry is fine as a hobby, as a sidebar, as a side hustle, but definitely not as a career. You should be a doctor, a lawyer, an educator, a business person, because that's where the money is. That's where the safety is. See, fasting in this case is allowing God to lead those that you love into ministries and places that are hard to see, hard to deal with, and yet it's a calling of God. Sometimes that's pain and suffering. Sometimes that's difficulty. And as parents, as leaders, as friends and family, we have to be able to fast from telling people what they should do that makes us feel comfortable, rather than saying, follow your heart. No, follow God's lead into where he leads you. Too often we find ourselves dictating what we think should happen and keeping that kind of control. So we need to fast from the idea that we are in charge. Who is in charge of this world? Only God. And we rely upon him. And even when things are hard, we fast from the desire to tell people what to do. Secondly, we find Mary in a different place. Jesus is now grown. And they're attending a wedding in Cana in Galilee. And you've heard the story again. As they're at the wedding, the wine runs out. What a faux pas. What a social problem this is. So Mary goes to Jesus and says, I'm paraphrasing, do you mind? Don't just stand there. Do something, Jesus. Now, she has this sense that he can be more powerful than he's ever been before, that he can solve things in ways that you and I could never think of. She believes in him and has encouraged him to fly, to do things, to fulfill his ministry. And Jesus has looked at her and said, oh, mother, leave me alone. Again, I'm paraphrasing. And it wasn't that he was disrespecting her, but what did he say? Literally, he said, the time hasn't come yet. I'm not ready to do this. So Mary turns to the servants there and she says, just do whatever he says. Now again, you wouldn't think of this as being fasting. If she would have said, well, I was going to drink wine, but I'm fasting this week. I won't have any wine. That would be more understandable, right? Or this is what God did to control the wine consumption, was to have it run out, and they should probably drink more water anyway. We're all trying to do that in all of our bottles and filters and so forth. But no, Mary insisted instead that this is, we would learn later, his first miracle. But when she turned to the servants and said, just do whatever he tells you, she is fasting from being in command, in control, and instead picking up the mantle of patience. How many of you would consider yourself to be patient people? That's what I thought. How many of you would assume that the person sitting next to you is an impatient person? It runs in families. It's a disease that we all have. Stoplights or doctor's offices or Sonic. It doesn't matter. We want what we want when we want it right now. And Mary had to give that up and say, I'll be patient. I mean, have you ever known a parent who was getting pretty impatient with the choices that their kids were making? Jesus, you're 30. It's time to grow up. It's time to do what I want you to do. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, kids need to be reminded to move along. But there's also a place where we say, I want to fast from being in control and thinking that I know what's best for all people around me, and in my patience, simply say, listen to God and follow him. You see, there's a difference between saying, do it for yourself, and letting them learn to fly with God. Well, the third place we see Mary in Jesus' life, who I think is fasting from control, fasting from telling him what to do, is a place that's one of the most difficult moments for Mary, I think. Somebody must have come to her at some point while Jesus is out teaching and doing miracles and gaining his disciples and training them. Somebody must have come to Mary and said, Mary, we need to talk. We really are seeing some signs of serious dementia with your son, Jesus. They knew what mental health was just as much as you and I know. Now, maybe they had different words for it, different terms, and definitely different treatments, but they truly thought that he was insane, or at least possessed by a demon. And they sought some reason to control him, to limit him, to protect him from himself even. So Mary gets together with the family, and they travel to wherever Jesus is, but they can't get to him because he's in a house doing miracles and teaching, and there's so many people they can't get there. So they simply pass word in, hey, Jesus, your mother's here. Now, you would think that that would be pretty important. You would think that he would stop what he was doing and go find out what's going on. You would think that he would confer with her or talk with her, but instead he asks, who are my mother and my brothers? Looking around at those who sat with him, he said, behold, my mother and my brothers are here. For whoever does the will of God, the same is my brother and my sister and my mother. So let's be clear here. Jesus isn't rejecting Mary. He's not saying, well, she's no longer my mother. I went and picked my own family. No, just the opposite. But what he's saying is that the circle is larger now. It includes all who belong to the new movement of following Jesus and what they're going to be doing. And what is she fasting from? Again, she's fasting from controlling what Jesus does, where he goes, or how he does it. You see, Mary had the courage to let go. She had the wherewithal to sit in the back seat. We don't hear another word about Mary until the crucifixion. She had to take a back seat, second path. And it wasn't that Jesus never saw her again. I believe that they probably had family reunions, meals, and whatnot together. It wasn't that he was rejecting her. Don't get that idea. But rather, she knew that, just like John the Baptist said, that he must decrease while Jesus does what? Increase. And this is fasting too. This goes way beyond simply saying, I'm not having a Starbucks anymore during Lent. Nothing wrong with that. You've saved a lot of money. And you've driven Starbucks stock price down, down, down. They miss you. But it's something different here. It's not just giving up something that I could have and choose not to, and so I'm controlling my appetite. No, it's something more than that. So that when Jesus is hanging on the cross, we are somewhat surprised and saddened to see that Mary is there. Surely she had to remember when that man told her, a sword will pierce your heart too, especially if she was there when the spear was thrust into Jesus' side. But the story we have here from the cross is fascinating only in the fact that she is there, because you see, I couldn't go through that, I don't think. I have a hard time. I refuse to watch Mel Gibson's movie, The Passion. Remember when that came out a number of years ago? I have sat through it. I have sat in a room while the movie was being played, watching somewhat through my fingers covering my eyes. Because I just don't want to see somebody who I love go through the worst day that I can imagine. It'd be not unlike one of my children being in a terrible car accident and having the state trooper say, hey, we have a camera there. We filmed it. Do you want to see it? Absolutely not. I don't want that image in my mind. I don't want to think about that or see it again. And yet Mary is there as a sign of support and love, I'm sure. She didn't want Jesus to go through it alone, but knowing that he had to go through it. We don't find her questioning or contradicting or criticizing in any way. Jesus, if you just would have listened to me, that we wouldn't have been here today. She knew that this was his destiny and his purpose and the plan, even though she had no idea how it would turn out. And even while she is there, what we see that the fasting is the fact that she has to give up on her care for Jesus, and he gives her a whole new mission. Standing next to her was John, one of the disciples, the one who he loved, John likes to say, woman, this is now your son. John, this is now your mother. We're all in this family together, and the fasting was this, is that Mary could not retire. John couldn't retire either. They couldn't back off of their ministry. They couldn't stop doing what they were doing. You don't fast from the things that are necessary in the kingdom. I've heard too many people of age and other ages, younger ages, say, I've done my part. I don't have to do that anymore. I'm too busy, too overwhelmed, or too whatever. Fasting from doing work is exactly the opposite of what God calls us to do. So what we find here is that we need to care for others, for that is the will of God. So let me come back around for just a second. Fasting is not an end unto itself, but it's a means of focusing our minds and our bodies for a spiritual purpose. You see, sometimes I think that some people fast, thinking that that's the fast way to get to the vending machine God that they want. Have you ever gone to a vending machine and put your money in, and then you press the button and you got something other than what you wanted? Has that ever happened? And we're disappointed, but we put up with it. And we say, well, next time I'll push a different button, or I'll put in more money, or whatever. And sometimes we think that that's our relationship with God. If I can just do the right thing, then God will vend to me what I want. And if I don't get what I want, then I have to change the process. I have to fast more, or pray differently, or go to church, or whatever. And that's not what it is. As a matter of fact, back in Isaiah chapter 58, there were some people who were pretty upset with God. And they said this, why have we fasted, they say, and you've not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you've not even noticed? Are they fasting to praise God, to rely on him? No, just the opposite. They think in some way they can manipulate God to give them what they want. And this is such an immature faith. A faith, yes, relying on God, I like it. But it's an immature faith to think that you can have whatever you want, whenever you want it, by somehow manipulating God. The people are fasting here, but they're angry for God not giving them what they want. That would be a means to a selfish ends. I think there's different reasons to fast. And I can't touch on them all today, especially since I'm running out of time fast. This new pulpit didn't make me preach any faster. But I do have 3 things I want to share with you. Number one of the purposes of fasting is to rely on God. But not always for us, but for those who are around us. Notice this passage from Ezra. He says, I was ashamed to ask the king for soldiers and horsemen to protect us from the enemies in the road, because we told the king, the gracious hand of our God is on everyone who looks to him, but his great anger against all who forsake him. So we prayed and fasted, it says. Do you get what's going on here? Ezra is saying, we told the king and the soldiers, God will protect us. And if we go back to them now and say, yeah, but could you just send a few soldiers? Maybe a few tasers and some pepper spray, just in case it gets out of hand. That's not showing a reliance on God. So sometimes fasting is saying, I simply trust God to give me what I want, and I'll prove to you that God will come through. Am I testing God in this? No, I'm testing me of relying on God. We fasted so that God would get the glory. In Luke chapter 9, it says, Jesus sending out his disciples, he says, take nothing with you. Don't take a walking stick, a traveler's bag, food or money, or even a change of clothes. Simply go and I will take care of you. Do you have that sense today that you are doing this so that you can show to others that your God is both willing and able to care for you in all situations? Is it okay to say, I have no idea how this is going to turn out, but I know that God is going to lead to something better than what it is today? That's what fasting is too. Because too often we want to, like Mary, step in, tell Jesus what to do, step in, try to get him to stop doing what he's doing or tell him where to go, when we need to step back and simply say, God, I rely on you 100%. The second purpose of fasting I want to talk about is to express grief. They took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree, and they fasted for 7 days. Now, they didn't decide to fast for 7 days. Let's say, we like this guy well enough that we'll fast for 7 days. That's not the way grief is. Grief, depression, sadness, the emotions we have, oftentimes will lead us to stop eating. I'm just not interested. I'm not taking care of my body because I want to exude or to emote. But see, here's the problem. Sometimes we control our emotions by eating too much. Anybody a stress eater here? I won't ask you to raise your hand, but you do anyway. How about a shopping therapy person? We get upset, so we hit Amazon or eBay or the outlet malls or the antique malls. You see, it's too easy for us to fill in something else to tamp those emotions down. They just don't go away. They don't evaporate. They don't get taken care of. And instead, I may be fasting so that I can really feel them, expressing them to God, because I want to get them out of my life and be cleared. And God can respond and care for us in those terrible emotions. It's not a test of endurance fasting, just the opposite. It's giving expression of emotion to God and saying, you are the only one that I want to share this with, the only one that can make a difference. Thirdly and lastly, and probably most easily to understand, is that we fast to give help to others. God says this is not the kind of fasting I've chosen, or it is to loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of the yoke, set the oppressed free, and break every yoke. In other words, I'm fasting to give to others. If you are fasting during Lent, you're saying, for instance, I'm going to skip lunch 2 days this week. Hallelujah, good for you. You are showing discipline. But the question is, why are you fasting? Is it so that you can take the money that you would have spent on lunch, maybe 20 or 30 bucks that week, and buy somebody lunch who doesn't have it? Or buy somebody lunch who needs to have a relationship with you? How are you going to use that money to somehow bless somebody else? Or that time that you're not preparing or eating or cleaning up from it, how will you bless somebody else with that? See, too often we get selfish in our fasting, and we simply say, this is what I have done to prove to myself that I can do it. But then we just take the money and spend it on something else, or we take the time and play Angry Birds, or we do something else with it, rather than really saying, how do I benefit somebody else for this? Mark chapter 12, Jesus talks about the question as to whether we're going to give to others out of our abundance, that's easy, or out of our poverty, out of our need. To really put myself on somebody else's level and make a change in their life. Resources redistributed for the power of God multiply in their effect. Well, I wish I had more time. I wish we could talk more about it. So I wish we could have a conversation. I'd be glad to do that with you to help you understand what fasting is, something much more deeper than just saying, I'm giving up chocolate. Because I can say that I gave up chocolate, but I still have it, and I'll just eat it later. Fasting is more than that. It is truly enhancing your relationship with God and with others and changing behaviors so that you are more Christ-like than you've ever been.